Some emergency calls arrive like thunder. Others begin years before the phone is ever picked up. Those are the ones that never leave you. This is one of them. I've worked in emergency communications long enough to know a hard truth. 911 doesn't always mark the beginning of a disaster. Sometimes, it's only the moment when the disaster finally becomes audible. By the time the call comes in, the fuse has already burned down to its final inch. The story of Susan Powell was never a mystery to me. It was a countdown. I never spoke to Susan directly. I never heard her voice on the line. Instead, I met her through what she left behind and what she feared enough to document. Susan was meticulous, not obsessive, not paranoid, prepared. She kept journals, saved emails, archived memories. People like that don't do it because they expect tragedy. They do it because they sense instability. She lived in West Valley City, Utah, in a quiet neighborhood where houses looked identical and danger blended in perfectly. From the outside, her life appeared ordinary. Married, 2 young sons, a modest home. But inside, Susan was slowly being erased. Her husband, Josh, didn't match the stereotype people expect. He wasn't explosive. He wasn't loud. He didn't draw attention. He was quiet, detached, emotionally vacant. The kind of man who didn't argue. He waited. Susan carried everything. The children, the finances, the emotional weight. Josh drifted between jobs, resentment quietly hardening inside him. Friends noticed Susan changing. She grew hesitant, less confident, like someone who was constantly bracing for impact. She wasn't imagining it. Then there was Stephen, Josh's father, a shadow that turned Susan's discomfort into dread. Stephen didn't admire Susan. He obsessed over her. He filmed her without consent, wrote songs about her, documented her movements. Worse than that, he watched her in private moments. Susan felt hunted, and Josh knew. That silence, that refusal to protect her, mattered more than words ever could. In one journal entry, Susan wrote something that still feels like a message meant for the future. If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one. She named Josh. That wasn't fear. That was awareness, sharpened by survival instinct. Susan wasn't planning to disappear. She was planning to escape. Search histories later showed divorce research, financial planning. She was preparing quietly, the most dangerous moment in any controlling relationship. She didn't tell many people. She didn't have time. That night changed everything. Susan was home with her sons, Charlie, 5, and Braden, just 2. Winter had settled in hard. Josh claimed he took the boys camping. In the middle of the night, in freezing temperatures, on a school night. Nothing about it made sense. Susan didn't go, he said. She wasn't feeling well. By morning, she was gone. Not missing. Gone in a way that felt wrong. Her purse, her phone, her shoes, her coat, all untouched. The house didn't look disturbed. It felt hollow. Police arrived for a welfare check. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. Just absence. Josh returned with the children and an unsettling calm. Officers noticed scratches on his hands and neck. His explanations shifted. Details bent under pressure. The minivan tested positive for blood. Still, no body. And then Charlie started talking. Charlie said things that didn't align with Josh's story. Mommy came with us. Daddy took Mommy somewhere. Mommy didn't come back. These weren't fantasies. They were fragments of memory. Josh showed no grief, no panic, just defensiveness. Cold. Mechanical. Josh moved the boys to Washington State, away from Utah and public scrutiny. Legally, he was still just a husband of a missing woman. Stephen was arrested, not for Susan, but for voyeurism. Even behind bars, he believed Susan was alive, still writing about her, still obsessed. The fuse kept burning. By the time February 5th, 2012 arrived, I knew instinctively that this would be the kind of call that stays in your mind forever. Josh Powell had arrived at his rental home in Graham, Washington, for a supervised visit with Charlie and Brayden. The social worker waited outside, clipboard in hand, unaware that the worst was about to unfold. That seemingly safe protocol was about to fail catastrophically. Josh ushered the boys inside quickly. Then, in a flash, he slammed the door shut and locked it. For the first few seconds, it didn't register. Then neighbors reported screaming from inside the house. I remember listening to the 911 call later. The social worker's voice was shaking, but not screaming. She described the situation as calmly as she could. "He won't let me in. The children are inside. There's a smell of gasoline. I don't know what to do." The sound on the recording makes your stomach drop. Every second felt like it stretched for hours. The reports later confirmed what we already feared. Josh had attacked his sons with a hatchet. Then he poured gasoline throughout the house. He ignited it deliberately. The explosion could be heard blocks away. The entire neighborhood shook. The social worker remained on the line with 911, relaying every detail. But she was helpless. Every sound of crackling fire, every panicked breath from the children made the call unbearable to listen to. "I smell gas. He won't let me in. This could be life-threatening." Her words were precise, her fear real. But by the time help arrived, it was too late. When firefighters finally breached the house, Josh, Charlie, and Brayden had already succumbed to blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation. The deliberate nature of the attack made it clear. Josh wanted absolute control, even in death. This call wasn't the first warning. It was the final echo of a story that had been unfolding for years. In another case, years later in Lakeland, Florida, a 76-year-old woman, Loretta Pickard, faced a fire alone in her home after hip surgery. She relied on her walker and could barely move. But unlike the Powell tragedy, she immediately called 911. The line connected, and for nearly 20 minutes, she remained calm yet frightened. She described her location, her limitations, and her need for urgent rescue. "They know I'm in here, right?" she whispered. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" The dispatcher reassured her. Sirens were heard. The team had gear, training, and manpower, but critical delays and miscommunication occurred. For about 8 agonizing minutes, firefighters did not enter. Protocol and hesitation outweighed urgency. The fire consumed the house. Loretta's breathing slowed. Every sound on the line grew heavier. Eventually, the dreaded silence fell. By the time crews entered, she was gone. Later, investigations revealed missteps stacked together. Communication gaps, hesitation due to procedure, disregarded exceptions for immediate life-threatening scenarios. Even worse, a fire captain had recorded a Snapchat video of the burning house while she was still trapped. The public outrage was enormous. The county later approved a settlement for her family, and protocols were rewritten. But for Loretta, it was far too late. Whether it's Josh Powell or Loretta Pickard, some common threads emerge. 911 calls as last hope. Often the line is the only connection between life and death. System failures amplify tragedy. Delays, miscommunication, and misplaced protocol can cost lives. Warning signs ignored. Years of subtle danger often precede sudden catastrophe. Human attention falters. Even trained responders, can make mistakes in high-stress scenarios. Listening to these calls, you can almost feel the desperation, the calm in panic, the rationality amidst chaos, the futile hope that someone will reach them in time. Some calls don't end when the line goes dead. They linger, haunting everyone who hears them. The Powell family case shows the horrors of control and obsession, and how a warning ignored for years can culminate in unspeakable tragedy. Loretta's story shows the limits of human response, even when the victim follows protocol and calls immediately. Both cases remind us that emergency systems are only as good as the humans who operate them. When you hear a 911 call, remember, it may be more than a cry for help. It may be the last echo of a life hanging by a thread that no one saw until it snapped. Growing old is inevitable. By the time you reach your 70s, the body no longer moves like it once did. Bones ache, muscles weaken, the speed you once relied on vanishes. For Loretta Pickard, 76 years old, living alone in Lakeland, Florida, life had slowed to its natural rhythm, painfully slow. Recovering from hip surgery, she moved with painstaking care from room to room. Her walker was both lifeline and lifeboat. But on the evening of November 23, 2018, speed became the deciding factor between life and death. Smoke began curling beneath her door. Loretta didn't panic. She didn't assume it would pass. She knew what fires could do. Using the strength she had left, she grabbed her cell phone and dialed 911. Her voice was calm, but measured, tinged with fear that she barely let escape. "Hello? I'm trapped inside. I live alone. I just had hip surgery. I can't get out by myself." She repeated it, ensuring the dispatcher understood her exact situation. Every word mattered, every syllable a lifeline. The dispatcher reassured her that help was on the way. She could hear the distant sirens. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered like a candle in the smoke-filled room. "They know I'm in here, right?" she asked, voice quivering slightly. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" The fire crews were outside, gear ready, hoses in place, radios in hand, training drilled into every responder. Yet, for 8 agonizing minutes, no one entered. Loretta's words slowed as the smoke thickened. Every breath became a battle, every cough a reminder that time was fleeting. "I can't. It's too thick. Please hurry." She clung to the voice on the other end. A connection, the last tether to life. The building's flames were not just devouring wood and drywall. They were consuming the very air she relied on. She was aware, conscious, waiting. And then the silence came. The phone went dead. Investigators later detailed the failures, communication gaps between dispatcher and fire crews, over-reliance on protocol, 2 in, 2 out, instead of acting on immediate life threat, lack of clarity about exact location and mobility limitations, hesitation due to procedural caution. Even worse, a fire captain recorded a Snapchat video of the burning house while Loretta was still inside. A moment frozen in time. Public outrage followed. The county approved a settlement for her family. Protocols were updated, and training was revised. But for Loretta, nothing could reverse what had been lost. Across these cases, Powell, Plush, and Pickard, the pattern is disturbingly clear. 911 is the last line of defense. The moment someone calls, the countdown has often already started. Warning signs often precede catastrophe. Susan Powell had warned us in her journals. Kyle Plush tried to save himself in the minivan. Loretta relied on her immediate action. Systems can fail when human judgment falters. Protocol, procedure, and delayed communication became the common threads that turned danger into tragedy. These calls are haunting not because of horror effects or movie-like suspense. They are haunting because of real, human vulnerability. Kyle Plush, trapped under his own minivan seat, whispered for help as the minutes stretched into hours. Susan Powell's children remembered fragments, piecing together an unthinkable truth. Loretta Pickard called calmly, logically, desperately, and still, no one reached her in time. We, as listeners, can only imagine the weight of knowing your survival depends on someone else, and that someone else might fail. I've replayed these calls countless times. The voices are etched in memory. I'm going to die here. They're coming for me, right? The faint coughs, the whispered pleas, the final silence. These calls remind us, life is fragile. Help is not guaranteed. And yet, the human spirit, measured, rational, even in panic, still reaches out for connection. It's a reminder that emergency systems are only as strong as the humans behind them, and that vigilance, empathy, and swift action are more than protocol. They are lifelines. I have listened to thousands of emergency calls in my life, some loud, some chaotic, some filled with anger, panic, or violence. But there are a few calls that don't need screaming to destroy you. They arrive quietly, almost politely, and they stay with you forever. This is one of those calls. I still remember the exact timestamp burned into my memory. 3:16 p.m., an ordinary afternoon. Clear skies over Cincinnati, Ohio. School dismissal traffic beginning to clog the roads. Nothing about that day felt special, until the line opened. At first I thought it was a pocket dial. Static. Breathing. Something heavy shifting in the background. Then I heard a voice. Young. Weak. Strained. Like every word was being squeezed out of him. Hello? Hello? Can anyone hear me? I leaned closer to my screen, adjusting my headset. 911. What is your emergency? There was a pause, then the sound of metal creaking, a dull thud, and a voice that barely sounded human anymore. I'm stuck. I can't move. I asked him where he was. Standard procedure. Location first. Always. But he wasn't answering clearly. His words came broken, as if his lungs were collapsing with every breath. I'm at a school. 7 Hills. 7 Hills School. A private school on the east side of Cincinnati. Quiet neighborhood. Tree-lined streets. Tennis courts tucked behind a large parking lot. I dispatched officers immediately. But something about his voice told me this wasn't a normal emergency. This wasn't a car crash. There were no sirens in the background. No traffic noise. Just pressure. He kept saying he was in his bed, which didn't make sense. Then he corrected himself, or tried to. I'm in the back. I'm trapped. I asked him what he was trapped in. The line went quiet. Then, faintly, I'm going to die here. Those words don't hit you immediately. They sink in later. Like poison. Officers were already en route. I stayed on the line, repeating questions, trying to anchor him to consciousness. Can you tell me what's around you? Are you inside a building? Are you hurt? His breathing grew heavier, wheat, labored. I could hear something pressing down on him. Then silence. The call disconnected. I stared at my screen longer than I should have. We don't get time to process emotions in this job. Another call came in, then another. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Minutes later, 3:35 p.m., the same number called back. This time, his voice was clearer, not stronger, just resigned. "I don't think I have much time left." My stomach dropped. I asked him his name. "Kyle. Just Kyle." He told me he was 16, a sophomore, a tennis player. He said he had come to school for a match. He said he never made it out of his van. That's when the story finally made sense. He explained that his tennis bag was in the back of the vehicle, a gold 2004 Honda Odyssey. He had climbed inside to reach it, and then the seat moved. The third row seat had folded back suddenly. Mechanical failure. Gravity. 70 pounds of unforgiving force. It slammed him backward into the cargo area, pinned him upside down, crushed his chest, his legs trapped, his arms useless. He couldn't breathe properly. Every inhale felt like drowning. "I can't feel my legs anymore," he whispered. I typed frantically, entering every detail into the system. Vehicle description, color, make, model, exact location. I radioed updates, but something went wrong. Somewhere between my screen and the officer's radios, the most important detail disappeared. They searched the lot, walked past rows of cars, never checked inside the minivan. They didn't hear him. They cleared the call. I was still listening to him die. Kyle's voice grew weaker. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "If I don't make it, can you tell my mom I love her?" My throat tightened. We're trained not to promise anything, not to get personal. But in that moment, training failed me. "I'm here," I said. "Just stay with me." He tried, but his body was losing the fight. The pressure on his chest had been cutting off oxygen for hours. Slow suffocation, crush asphyxia. The most terrifying part? Help had been less than 100 feet away. Cars passed by, students left practice, teachers locked up classrooms. No one heard him. No one saw him. The line went silent again. This time, it never came back. Hours later, long after my shift ended, I learned the rest. Kyle's father, Ronald, went searching when his son didn't come home. He checked the parking lot himself. That's where he found the van. That's where he found his son. Still trapped. Still inside. 6 hours after the first call, I sat in my car that night and cried like I never had before. Not because of what happened, but because of how close help was. Because of how preventable it all was. Because a 16-year-old boy had to spend his final moments alone, whispering goodbye to a stranger on a phone line. Years later, the city settled the case. Millions of dollars, policy changes, training reforms. But none of that brings him back, and none of that erases the sound of his voice in my head. Some calls end when the line disconnects. This one never did. I still hear him. I have learned something unsettling about certain cases over the years. Some arrive suddenly, like lightning striking without warning. Others move slowly, quietly, like a fuse burning in real time. You don't hear the explosion at first. You just smell smoke. This story belongs to the second kind, long before the 911 calls, long before the police reports, long before the headlines. This tragedy was already in motion. I never met Susan face to face. I only met her through what she left behind. Journals, emails, calendar notes, saved documents. Susan was the kind of person who documented life, not because she was paranoid, but because she was organized, careful, thoughtful. The kind of woman who made grocery lists weeks in advance. The kind of mother who saved birthday cards and school drawings. The kind of person who sensed when something wasn't right and wrote it down. By December 2009, Susan was living in West Valley City, Utah, in a modest suburban home that looked like 100 others on the street. But inside that house, something was rotting. Her husband, Josh, was not violent in the way people expect monsters to be. He didn't yell in public. He didn't leave bruises anyone could point to. He wasn't explosive. He was quiet, withdrawn, emotionally vacant. The kind of man who stood in the corner of a room and watched. People often underestimate that type. Susan didn't. In her journals, she wrote about control, isolation, fear that didn't have a shape yet, only a direction. Josh drifted between jobs, resentful, detached from responsibility. Susan carried everything else. The children, the finances, the emotional labor of a marriage already collapsing. Friends noticed the change. She grew quieter, more hesitant, like someone always listening for footsteps behind her. Then there was Stephen, Josh's father, a presence that turned Susan's discomfort into dread. Stephen didn't just cross boundaries, he erased them. He followed Susan with a camcorder, filming her without consent. He wrote songs about her, sang them, recorded them. He documented her life like she belonged to him. Worse than that, he watched her in private moments, through glass, through cracks, through opportunities no one should ever take. Susan wrote about feeling hunted, like prey. What made it unbearable wasn't just Stephen's behavior. It was Josh's silence. He knew, and he did nothing. That silence mattered. In one journal entry, Susan wrote something that chills me every time I read it. If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one. She named Josh. That wasn't paranoia. That was a warning. Susan was planning to leave. There was proof. Search histories, divorce research, financial inquiries. She was quietly building an exit plan, the most dangerous moment for anyone in a controlling relationship. She didn't tell many people. She didn't have time. That night still feels heavy when you reconstruct it. Susan was home with her sons, Charlie, 5 years old, and Braden, just 2. Winter had settled over Utah. Cold, dark, early. Josh claimed that night that he took the boys camping. Camping, in the middle of the night, in freezing temperatures, on a school night. Nothing about that made sense. Susan didn't go with them, according to Josh. He said she wasn't feeling well. By morning, Susan was gone. Not just missing. Gone in a way that felt unnatural. Her purse was still there, her phone, her shoes, her coat, everything someone would take if they intended to leave. Untouched. The house felt hollow. Police arrived for a welfare check. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just absence. When Josh returned with the boys, officers noticed things immediately. Scratches on his hands, marks on his neck. His explanations shifted. Details changed depending on who asked and when. The minivan tested positive for blood. But without a body, it wasn't enough. And then Charlie started talking. Children don't understand lies the way adults do. They remember moments, fragments. Charlie told investigators, "Mommy came with us. Daddy took Mommy somewhere. Mommy didn't come back." Those weren't stories. Those were pieces of memory. Josh didn't react like a grieving husband. No panic, no desperation, only defensiveness. Cold, mechanical. Josh took the boys and left Utah. He went to Washington State, away from scrutiny. Legally, he was still just a husband with a missing wife. Stephen, meanwhile, was finally arrested. Not for Susan, but for voyeurism. Even in prison, Stephen believed Susan was alive, still writing about her, still singing about her, still obsessed. Josh left behind a digital will. It wasn't grief-filled, it was angry. He wrote about betrayal, control, money, and he made one thing terrifyingly clear. If he lost his children, he would not accept it. That wasn't despair. That was a threat. By 2012, his mental state had deteriorated. The courts ordered supervised visitation only. Susan's parents begged for custody. They said something terrible was coming. They were right. By early 2012, everyone involved knew something terrible was coming. No one could prove it in a courtroom. But fear doesn't always need evidence. It needs patterns. And Josh Powell was becoming one. The courts believed they had found a compromise. Josh would be allowed to see his sons, Charlie and Braden, but only under supervision. No overnight visits, no unsupervised contact. On paper, it looked safe. In reality, it tightened the fuse. Josh didn't see the ruling as protection for the children. He saw it as theft, control being taken away from him. And control was the only thing he had left. Susan's parents fought relentlessly for full custody. They warned the court. They warned social services. They said Josh was unstable. They said he was dangerous. Their fear wasn't dramatic. It was specific. But the system moved slowly, and Josh did not. On February 5th, 2012, Josh arrived at his rental home in Graham, Washington, for a supervised visit. The social worker stood outside with Charlie and Braden. Something about Josh felt off. His behavior was rigid, his tone flat. Then he did something unexpected. He rushed the boys inside and slammed the door. The social worker didn't even have time to react. Seconds later, the house exploded. I wasn't the dispatcher who took that call, but I've listened to it over and over. The call came from the social worker. Her voice wasn't screaming. It was shaking. "I need help immediately," she said. "He just locked the door. The children are inside." Then the blast. The sound is unmistakable. A sudden roar. Glass shattering. Air collapsing. Her scream cuts off halfway through. That's the moment the fuse reaches the end. Josh had killed himself. And his sons. The fire engulfed the house in seconds. By the time responders arrived, there was nothing to save. The investigation confirmed what Susan's parents had feared all along. Josh had planned it. Gasoline, preparation, intent. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a final act of control. Susan was never found. No remains, no grave, just absence. Her disappearance and the explosion became one continuous tragedy, the ending written years earlier in her journal. People often ask why some cases haunt us more than others. It's not always the violence, it's the warnings. Susan warned everyone, in writing, in fear, in intuition sharpened by years of living with something she couldn't name, only feel. The 911 call wasn't just the moment of explosion. It was the years leading up to it. Every ignored sign, every dismissed concern, every silence that mattered. Some emergencies don't sound like emergencies. They sound like paperwork, like domestic disputes, like family court hearings. But they end the same way. With sirens, with smoke, with children who never had a chance. I think about Susan often, about what it must feel like to write your own warning and hope someone reads it in time. About how danger doesn't always kick down doors. Sometimes it sits quietly at the dinner table, and by the time the phone rings, it's already too late. I've been an emergency dispatcher for over a decade. I've heard gunshots through phone speakers. I've listened to people bleed out while begging me not to hang up. I've taken calls where children screamed for parents who were already dead. But none of those prepared me for the day a 16-year-old boy slowly suffocated while I stayed on the line, powerless, listening. Some calls are violent, some are chaotic. This one was quiet, and that's what made it unbearable. April afternoons in Cincinnati, Ohio, are usually calm. By mid-afternoon, the city hums at a predictable rhythm. School dismissal traffic, parents rushing between activities, teenagers flooding parking lots with laughter, and music leaking from car windows. At 3:16 p.m., I was halfway through my shift. My screen lit up with an incoming call. No screaming, no sirens, no panic in the first second. Just breathing. Slow, strained. At first I assumed it was an accidental dial. It happens more than people think. Phones press against fabric. Siri misfires. Open lines with background noise. I was seconds away from disconnecting when I heard a voice. "Hello?" It was faint, almost swallowed by static. I straightened in my chair. 911, what is your emergency? There was a long pause, then a sound. Metal shifting. Something heavy settling. "I'm stuck," the voice said. It was young. Too young. "Okay," I said calmly. "Tell me where you are." Another pause. "I'm at a school." Schools immediately raise flags. Protocols kick in. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "What school?" I asked. Seven Hills. Seven Hills School. Private. Upscale area. Tennis courts. Academic buildings. Quiet parking lots. Not the kind of place where you expect an emergency call like this. I dispatched officers immediately. But even as I did, something felt wrong. His breathing wasn't panicked. It was restricted. Like his chest couldn't expand fully. "Can you tell me what happened?" I asked. "I climbed into my car," he said, "to get my bag." That sentence stuck with me. Not out of the car. Into it. As he spoke, his voice cracked. Not from fear, but from effort. "I can't move," he whispered. "There's pressure on my chest." I asked him if he'd been in an accident. "No," he said. "The car isn't moving." That was the moment my skin prickled. No collision. No crash. Then what was trapping him? I asked him to describe his surroundings. He struggled. "It's dark. I'm upside down. Something's on me." His words blurred together. I could hear thudding sounds, like he was trying to push something away. I told him to stay calm, to focus on breathing slowly. But his breaths were shallow. Too shallow. Then he said it. "I don't think I can breathe much longer." By 3:26 p.m., 2 officers were patrolling the Seven Hills parking lot. I knew that because I watched their GPS icons move across the screen. They were close. Painfully close. I kept Kyle on the line. "Can you see anyone?" I asked. "Can you make noise?" "I'm trying," he said. Then, a muffled bang. Then silence. I called out his name. "Kyle. Kyle, are you still with me?" Static answered. The call dropped. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Something told me this wasn't over. At 3:35 p.m., the same number came back. This time, Kyle's voice was clearer, but weaker, like he'd already accepted something. "I don't think I have much time left," he said quietly. That sentence should never come from a child. I asked his age. 16. I asked his name. Kyle. Just Kyle. No last name yet. No parents on file. Just a boy trapped in a machine designed to carry families safely. He told me more this time. The car was a gold Honda Odyssey. Early 2000s model. 3rd row seating. He explained how the rear seat had folded back suddenly when he leaned on it, trapping him between the seat and the cargo space, upside down, crushing his chest. 70 pounds of dead weight pressing into his ribs, preventing his lungs from expanding. Crush asphyxia. A slow, invisible killer. I typed furiously. Vehicle description. Exact location. Parking lot. I relayed everything, or at least I thought I did. Kyle's voice was fading. His sentences came in fragments now. "I'm getting tired," he said. "My head feels weird." Classic hypoxia. I tried to keep him alert. "Tell me about your day," I said. "Why were you at school?" "Tennis," he replied. "We had a match. A normal day. A normal kid." Then his voice cracked. "If I don't make it, can you tell my mom I love her?" I swallowed hard. We aren't supposed to make emotional promises, but I couldn't stay silent. "I'm here with you," I said. "Help is close." It was a half-truth. Help was close, but not close enough. At 3:37 p.m., officers cleared the scene. No distress found. No further action needed. They drove away. I didn't know that yet. I was still listening to Kyle's breathing slow, his words slurred. "I can't feel my legs," he murmured. That meant circulation failure. Minutes later, the line went dead. No disconnection tone, just nothing. I sat there, headset pressed to my ear, hoping, praying I'd hear him again. I never did. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. When the report came in, it hit like a physical blow. Kyle was found 6 hours later, by his father, in the same parking lot, still trapped. The officers had walked past the van. The information about the vehicle, the color, make, model, had never reached them clearly. A breakdown in communication, a failure at multiple levels. But none of that mattered to a boy who spent his final hours suffocating alone. There were investigations, audio reviews, policy changes, training seminars, millions of dollars paid in settlements. But no training can undo what happened. No money can erase the sound of his voice. Sometimes, during quiet shifts, I swear I still hear him. "Hello?" And I answer, even though I know no one's there. Because these calls are real. Because they happen quietly. Because sometimes help is only feet away, and still too far. And because Kyle deserved to make it to that tennis court.